right, good morning, everybody. My name is Donnie Featherman. I'm the program manager for the Building Codes and Standards section. I'll be giving the presentation today specifically to rules that were updated through the last legislative approval. And then Sam Albrecht, he is the director of the Office of Regulatory Oversight. He'll be helping out with the recording and admitting anybody who's coming in a little bit late to the presentation. But we're going to go ahead and focus specifically on the seller's registration, seller requirements, but we'll go over all the different rules just to make sure that everybody's aware of everything that's changed since the last rulemaking, which was part of the HB 22-1242 tiny home bill. And then so this new rulemaking is going to be based off of the adoption of the Colorado solar and energy readiness requirements, and then also the new energy efficiency requirements that were adopted through statute last year. But we'll go ahead and just get started here, start the presentation. If anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. We'll try to get to them as soon as possible. If you have any questions that you want to put in the chat, please do so, and we can answer those when we have the time to do it. We'll try to get through these as fast as we can so we can make some time to have an open discussion toward the end of the presentation. But if there's anything that you would like to talk about sooner than later, or if it's part of that slide, we can go ahead and do so. All right. Is there any questions before we get going? Nope. All right. Let me see if I get this going. You got to excuse me. This is the first time I've done one of these presentations with the I think this is Teams. So let's see if I get this right here. All right. So again, my name is Donnie Featherman, program manager, Building Codes and Standards section. I oversee all the functions of the division or within the Division of Housing for modular, mobile homes, HUD homes, and tiny homes that are built for use in the state of Colorado. We are made up of a team of, I believe, 8. And so we got some administrators that help process registrations and inspections. We got 4 building inspectors that oversee all the inspection processes and site investigations for complaints or audits. And then we have 2 plan reviewers that oversee the plan review functions and QA manual reviews, stuff like that. What we're going to do today is, like I said, we're going to go ahead and talk about the rules that have changed since the last rulemaking. We'll go through each section, make sure that you're aware of the different changes. Probably won't get into why they were changed, but if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them on the reason if needed. And then toward the end, we'll talk about things that are specific to sellers' requirements. And then if you have any questions after that, we can go ahead and get into the open discussion. All right. So here's our agenda. We're going to go over some ground rules, make sure that everybody's on the same page about what we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about the Building Codes and Standards section itself, what approved codes that we have, the new codes that we're going to be adopting, and then all the modifications to the rules. And then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up and have that discussion. All right. All right. So ground rules. We just want to make sure that everybody's aware we are recording this session. So anything you say will be in the recording. So if you're going to be talking, just make sure that you keep it professional. And then also all the stuff that we'll be talking about today is through statute that has already been approved. So we cannot change anything that has already been approved through statute. If you would like to make changes in the future, you would have to go through the legislative process. And then any rules that we will be talking about today have already been approved. So we can't change the rules today either. And then also, we're only going to be discussing what Colorado has adopted. Any state that is outside of our jurisdiction, which is anything outside of Colorado, we can't discuss their rules or their laws. We're going to be talking specifically about Colorado statute and rules. Okay. All right, so this is just a quick background of what regulates what we have in rule and our rules, the kind of some things that came up recently and why the rules were changed. But through statute, what controls our rulemaking process is what's been approved for statute, the Colorado statute 2432, 3301 through 3329. The last rulemaking that we had prior to this one was because of HB 22-1242, which was the tiny home bill. We had to implement rules that govern the construction, installation, sales, and manufacturing of tiny homes. And then the new rule change was due to HB 1362, which was the adoption of the new energy code requirements through Colorado, and also the implementation of the Colorado Model Electric and Solar Ready structures. Basically, what the new bill required is that the manufactured building program adopt rules that were implemented Colorado electric and solar ready structures, and then at a minimum we had to adopt the 21 IECC or better, and there was no room for changes like amendments. It had to be the 2021 as is, and if you did make any changes, they would have to be approved through the energy office, the Colorado Energy Office. All right. The other thing to clarify, the manufacturer structure program, we had to do it by January 1st of 2025. All local jurisdictions have until 7/1 of 2026 to adopt the same requirements. All right, so there's going to be a little bit of a staggering enforcement on this. So anything that's being built on site, if you deal with site construction, those requirements, the locals may have already adopted them, but they do not have to adopt them until 7/1 of 2026. While effective January 1st of this upcoming year, we have to start enforcing these requirements. All right, just a quick overview of our program. Again, we see all the functions of plan reviews, inspections, administration for all the different stakeholders that are involved with the sales, manufacturing, inspections, and installation of manufactured homes in the state of Colorado, and also the construction and inspections of commercial modular construction in the state of Colorado. We do have quite a few positions that are still open. We're trying to fill those positions to accommodate a more faster processing time of inspections, plan reviews, administration. But once we get those positions filled, we should be, I believe at the 13 FTEs total, which should help out with the entire process and hopefully get things turned around a lot faster. But if you look at this slide here, these are just the different functions of each section within our program, and then down below, just a little bit more information on there on each process that we have. Okay. All right. So our current codes, this is what we're showing right here. These are codes that are currently adopted, and these are going to be effective until the end of this year, so 12/31/2024. Anything that has been sent in and approved would comply with these requirements. So we're all on the 2018 building codes and the 2015 energy code. HUD stays the same because that's a federally regulated product, and we follow the HUD codes for that. Anything that's built out of state, they follow their SAA, their IPA and DAPIA requirements for their approvals. We currently do not have any HUD manufacturers in the state of Colorado, but if we ever do get any HUD factories in the state of Colorado, we would follow those construction plan review and approval processes through HUD. And one thing that we did put into the current rules is Rule 2.15, which allows the modification of or alternate method of construction for these modular units. It doesn't apply to HUD. It doesn't apply to mobile homes. HUD, again, is fairly regulated. Mobile homes, they exist, but their construction manufacturers do not manufacture mobile homes anymore because mobile homes are considered anything built prior to 1976. All right. Tiny homes, it does apply to tiny homes because that is a new product and it's somewhat treated like a modular product. It just has its own building code requirements. All right. These are going to be the new codes. These are the new codes that were adopted through this past rulemaking process. So we're going to be adopting the 2021 IECC or ICC books, which includes the IECC and then all the other codes that were referenced in the last page. They're all going to be brought up to 2021. HUD is still going to be the same. One of the things that we did change, though, just because there's the changes that were in rule kind of push things out. Rule 2.15 is now Rule 2.20. Same thing. It's the same option for manufacturers to still be able to build a unit, an alternative way of building that unit. Three other codes that we adopted through the 1200 series, the ICC MBI 1200 series, as all the planning, design, fabrication, assembly, inspection, regulatory compliance, and then the mechanical plumbing systems and energy efficiency, water conservation of off-site construction. And then we also adopted the ICC MBI G6 standard, which is all of the, I think that's a typo. I believe the G6 was for the panelized construction. Is that correct, Sam?
Yes, that was correct.
Yeah, I think I messed up right there. But yes, the G6 is for the panelized construction requirements. Now, all these codes, although a lot of our current processes align with these, these adoptions help with the overall production of units that do come into Colorado, because if there's anything that another state is building that wants to build for the state of Colorado and they adopted these same standards, it'd be an easier approval process to be able to accept units that might have been doing that or might have been built to the same inspection processes, plan approval processes, things like that, right? We still have to review those structures prior to approval, but this gives that ability for us to do that. The other thing was, again, the Model Electric Ready and Solar Ready code. These are codes that were adopted through statute for the state of Colorado. A lot of these, I think some people get confused that all homes have to be have all these electric devices in them. They have to have solar equipment on them, and that's not the case. These are just prepping the homes for future installation of electric appliances and solar installation. It doesn't require you to install the solar system or everything has to be electric. It just gives the option for future construction. So there's not a large cost effect on the home when the homeowner wants to upgrade to electric only appliances or they want to install a solar panel system on their home. All right. So the 180 days effective date, that's 180 days from January 1st, which will be around July 1st of 2025. Anything that is that has been approved prior to January 1st that is still in construction, or maybe you got plans approved this year and you haven't started construction, that doesn't start until maybe January, February, March of next year, you're still allowed to use those plans. But if it exceeds that 180 days, you do have to bring those plans into compliance. It really depends on your model structure of how you're producing these units. If you're building like a cookie cutter type model, let's say you're going to build 20 of these units and they start production next year. If you get those 20 units done before that 180-day mark and the plans had been approved prior to July or January 1st, you'll still be able to use those construction plans to build those units. But if you let's say you just have a cookie cutter model that you just build those whenever somebody orders them, and you get an order after July 1st, that plan would have to be updated for the new code. Okay, and then we can talk about that a little bit later if you have any other questions about that. All right, is there any questions so far, Sam, in the chat?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, Donnie.
Okay. All right. So this is our current, not only in the last rules, but also the current rules of the minimum design criteria for our program. Although there are jurisdictions that have less requirements for wind, snow, and design temps. Actually, there's not one for design temp. We don't have a minimum for design temp, but some local jurisdictions have wind load speeds that are less than 115 mile an hour wind speed, 30 pound roof load. But at a minimum, any manufactured structure that comes into the state of Colorado that is modular does have to comply with 115 mile an hour VOLT wind load speeds, and then also 30 pound roof snow loads. Design temps are going to be specific to the site location, so there's not a minimum. We are looking into alternatives to the design temps, but it's going to be a little bit difficult to do that because the winter design temps that are specific to that location, all your mechanical loads are designed to that winter design temp, and they typically have to be specific to that. We're still looking into maybe alternatives for that, but at this time that is going to remain the same. And then one thing that we added was the radon mitigation. We've been asked quite a few times last year and years prior, do we have to put radon mitigation in these units? It's really going to be specific to the site that is going to. If the locals require radon mitigation, then you do have to comply with their requirements. I know some manufacturers, they put a radon pipe just in case. But if you look at the building codes, I think for the majority of Colorado, everything is within that site specific, depending on testing. So chances are the locals may or may not require that, but it's going to be a site specific requirement. For fire safety components, we're still going to continue to defer the fire suppression to the local building department. There's over 300 different jurisdictions in the state of Colorado, and it's hard to know when a local will require that. We don't have a minimum, all homes have to do this, or any homes over a certain square footage, things like that, like a local would have. So we defer that fire suppression requirement to the locals. If they do require it, it does have to be notated on the plan, and it should be notated on the OC form if there's any component of that fire suppression system that has to be completed on site, and that includes the final testing requirements and connections at the site location. So for instance, you have a 2-box unit and you have to make a connection from unit to unit for that fire suppression system, and it has to be inspected by the local fire department or Colorado Fire Prevention and Control. That inspection process has to happen, and then there's going to be a CORI, which is just a record of inspections that follows that home from the factory to the site location from start to finish to ensure that all processes have been completed for that fire suppression system and been inspected and signed off. And a new one that was added last year for the HB 22-1242 was the wildfire risk mitigation. We are deferring that as well, and that's going to continue for this new rulemaking or this new rule approval. That the wildfire risk, if the locals have a locally amended WUI code, or they have their own wildfire mitigation requirements, that you are to make sure that that unit complies with those requirements to be installed in that location. And I know that the Colorado Fire Prevention and Control, they're currently making new rules for a statewide WUI. I'm not sure where they're at right now with the entire process, but there's quite a few changes that they're making, or something that they're putting into rule for future construction for both site-built construction and manufactured buildings that are going to be in jurisdictions that have wildfire mitigation requirements. All right. The other thing that we've added into rule because of a new bill that passed for the ADUs is we're thinking that because modular construction is going to be a more easier process and faster process to get ADUs into some of these jurisdictions. We had to figure out a way to kind of take everybody's building code requirements into consideration for ADUs, because there's some locals may require fire separation between the units, or they might consider them the same structure and not require them. There's going to be setback requirements that are going to be different for each jurisdiction. So we're going to go ahead and defer the ADU fire separation to the locals. If there's any local fire separation requirements, those plans do have to reflect that, so that when we do our plan reviews, we can ensure that they are meeting the right fire separation requirements. So if there's a 1 hour or at a minimum, half-inch drywall on the inside of the interior wall between maybe the dwelling and the accessory dwelling, things like that. And then the same thing goes for fire suppression. If the locals require the ADU to be have a fire suppression system, again, that's going to fall under the local requirements. And then same thing for wildfire mitigation of the ADUs. All right. All right, so the administrative rules, this is just a breakdown of each rule. What each rule, I guess all the information that's entailed in rule 1, 2, 3 through 8. And then we'll go ahead and go through these changes that we made on the next slides. But this is just a general overview of each section here. All right, so in rule 1, this is the definition section. There's some changes that you can see that we made here. We defined certified for one of those changes, and the certified, the reason for defining certified, and also you'll see down there that registered was defined as well, is because the terminology that we use is specific to what's adopted through statute, and then also how we define each type of registration. As some of you know, that you might be hiring a registered installer versus a certified installer, or you might be purchasing structures from a registered manufacturer versus a certified manufacturer. But at the end of the day, a registered, everybody has to be registered in the state of Colorado to sell, manufacture, install, or inspect manufactured units in the state of Colorado. And a certified registration is just a status higher than a registered status, so it allows them to certify their own units. Like a registered installer can only install the unit. They have to get a third party or the Division of Housing to certify their unit. But a certified installer can install and certify their own installation. So that's just the delineation between the two areas. So just remember, everybody has to register. Only certain personnel are certified. All right. We clarified some things in the multifamily structure section, basically to delineate what the difference of a commercial townhouse and a residential townhouse construction, because the multifamily includes townhouse construction as part of the multifamily, I guess, family, or the type of construction. But we regulate townhouses that are built to the IRC the same way we would modular your single family construction, modular construction. But if it gets into the commercial side of things, where these things are more IBC regulated, then it does kick it into the multifamily certification process. So instead of getting silver insignias, they'll get black insignias. So that's clarified in Rule 1.18. Rule 1.22, open construction, and includes no cover, which was defined in Rule 1.19. The term was used in the previous rules, but it was never defined. Basically, the no cover is just that whenever you're doing the construction process, that structure leaves the factory with no panels that are concealing items behind the wall. So if you do let's say like a tough shed, for example, a tough shed that you see at Home Depot or Lowe's, those are no cover buildings, because all they do is they put an exterior sheathing on the outside, and you can see all the framing on the inside. So at the local level, when that unit gets installed in their jurisdiction, they can easily see anything that's being done on the inside. So that's a no cover. And then temporary structure and temporary use was added into the definitions. And this was to help with the tiny home, and then also commercial units that may be temporary in use. But basically a temporary structure is a structure that's in a location for a certain amount of time. And I believe we put it in at 180 days, and then you can get an extension on that. It's just something that we got to work with the locals, because the local might allow a structure to be there for a year or so, but per our rules and our regulations, a temporary structure is at a certain location for no more than 180 days. Temporary use, it can be a structure that's permanently there, but it's only going to be utilized maybe once a year, maybe only seasonally. It can be like some of these oil rig units that are being built for the pump houses, compression stations. It might just be, like I said, a cabin that somebody's using during the summertime, things like that. The structure might be there permanently, but they're only using it a certain amount of time. Again, I believe it's 180 days. Or the structure can be temporary structure and a temporary use. So it's only going to be there temporarily, and they're only going to use it temporarily. So that's going to be defined in our rule 1. Okay. All right. So rule 2. Our rule 2 is all the code stuff. So this is where we made any amendments, clarified any building code requirements, list all the adopted codes that we have in place. And then, so if you look in rule 2, it'll break it down by the buildings, gas, plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, or I believe mechanical, and the energy requirements. But there are some changes that were put in place for the IBC exemptions. So previous rules, it was anything that was less than 500 square feet, not put on a permanent foundation system, not considered hazardous building per the NEC, and then not connected to permanent power. The problem that created was that most local jurisdictions have a smaller footprint that they allow to be exempt from the building code, or not building code, but exempt from the permitting process. And if we are exempting buildings to the program, and then those buildings make their way to a local building department and they don't exempt it, now we've created a situation where they have a building that nobody's inspected, and now they're questioning what codes they were built to, who inspected it, things like that. So to make it aligned with most jurisdictions, we dropped that footprint down from 500 square feet to 120 square feet, which is the exemption that's in the IBC. And these are specifically for accessory structures that still not connected to permanent power, not on a permanent foundation system, and not considered a hazardous area per the NEC. All right. Other things that we changed is there's a section there for building components, and we changed that to open panel construction. The thing is with the building components is you can build like a lot of these hospitals are building bathroom groups that are components, right? Or we got some manufacturers that are building maybe a portion of a dwelling unit that might be attached to a site-built construction, right? Those are still building components. So to clarify that, we changed that section to open panel construction. So if you're doing open panel construction, which is defined in rule, then that structure will be exempt. And then it also includes anything that's been listed by a approved listing agency that would still be in there as an exemption as well. All right. One of the things that we did add in there as well is the IRC exemption requirements. We only had IBC exemption requirements, and we had been applying it to both IBC and IRC. So to be clear, we did add the IRC building exemption requirements in there. And I believe that is 200 square feet, not attached to permanent power, not on a permanent foundation system. And then I think it's still not considered hazardous area per the NEC. So there's a section in there for residential buildings that are exempt from the program. Again, like I talked about earlier, radon mitigation and ADU fire separations have been added to the table in rules for the building code requirements. So when you're looking at the building code requirements for minimum modular construction, it'll have radon mitigation and ADU fire separation as a local requirement. All right. All right. Sorry, I'm hearing some background noise. So the other thing too, windowsill requirements that were previously in Rule 2 have been removed in there. I think there's some code changes that address these issues in the 2021. So all those seal height amendments that we made in previous rules have been removed. And then for the tiny homes and tiny houses, what we did in the last rulemaking when we had to do the rule changes for tiny homes is we adopted the 2021 IRC Appendix Q, or I think it's AQ, and we basically use that section of the 2021 and made it applicable to the 2018. And so now that we adopted the 2021 codes, we removed all those or not all the changes, but we removed all those sections that we adopted. Since we adopted those codes, we just removed them out because it's the same thing that's in the building code when you look at those sections of the ICC books. But anything that was added into the tiny home and tiny house section, Appendix Q, those remained because those are amendments that we made to those specific sections. All right. The other thing that we made in Rule 2 to stay consistent with the Colorado Plumbing and Electrical Board is previous rules. What we had in there was the language that whenever the state electrical board adopted a new version of the NEC, we would adopt that same version. We do give 180 days to come into compliance for that as well. But there was nothing with the building codes. And so to my understanding, the local plumbing codes, they don't exactly adopt a code year, or they look at the ICC books, but they adopt sections from there. They don't adopt the actual year, but we'll try to stay consistent with if they start adopting sections from the 2024 IPC, we would take a look at what they've adopted, and if needed, we would adopt the newer version of the 2024 IECC. But in either case, for both the NEC and the IPC, if the state electrical and plumbing board adopt specific amendments, we don't adopt those amendments. We only adopt the same code year that they adopt. Okay. More stuff here for 2.5.1. These are all the NEC changes that we made. This is to eliminate a hazard that's created, that was created in the NEC. And part of it is just the what was adopted in the NEC, and also inspectors' interpretation of the code. So what we did is we eliminated the I guess the guess out of what's wall space. So anything that's underneath a peninsula or island countertop or work surface, we do not consider that wall space. So you're not required to install a receptacle at those locations. But in 2.5.2, if you do install a receptacle in those locations, they do have to comply with 210.52C3. So basically, they have to meet the requirements of if there's any overhangs, they have to be within that 12 inches of the countertop, and then comply with all the other requirements under 210.52. So you can't go and just not install a receptacle that doesn't comply with 210.52 and put one down below, because chances are you're going to create a hazard that way where there's no receptacle for them to use for their appliance, and then they start using the receptacle down below, which is going to create that hazard. Okay. Another big change for these homes is the removal of the blow order exemption. We're no longer going to allow a exemption for blow order testing. The 2021 requires all homes to be blow order tested, and also duct testing. So any homes that are built after the end of this year do have to have a blow order test and a duct blow order test. And then in some locations, I think in the IECC, if it's a climate zone 8, which fortunately for us, we only go from 4 to 7. But if anything changed down the road and they update some of those climate zones to the climate zone 8, there's going to be some HRV and ERV requirements for those locations. But duct blower and blow order tests are going to be required moving forward. Again, and then just the mention of the adoption of the 1200 series, the G6, and my misspelling there, and of the electric ready and solar ready requirements. All right, I'm trying to get through these real quick here. So these are some updates to the fees. We increased the installer fee, registration fee to $250. We did some revisions to the typos that we had in there, revisions to renewal for the supplemental fees, and then we have a second resubmittal fee, not a second revision fee. Then we also added a fee in there for revisions that are being made. The current rule now shows that it's by square footage, so we changed that to an hourly fee, because how do you charge a square footage on a structure that they're not really changing the footprint, right? The other thing is as-built structures will get a double fee for each respective fee if we find that a unit makes its way to Colorado and never went through the process, or you built a structure and never went through the plan approval process, things like that. All right. Rule 4 is all for all the manufacturers. We clarified some things in there for tiny homes, for people who want to do personal use tiny homes, build their own unit. We limited to 1 per household. And then we also put an option in there for tiny, oops, I think I put tiny, it's supposed to be tiny homes, sorry. Tiny homes that are built in a jurisdiction. If the locals would like to participate with us and do the inspections on those, we give an option in there for them to do that. And then third-party agencies, we put a process in there for third-party agencies to become certified. And then also when a third-party agency may start their factory processes, because we've been finding out that some of these manufacturers are some of the as-built structures that are coming in, is that there's no approved set of plans, and that's typically because the factory and the third-party agency who's doing the inspections may not have caught that maybe registration has been lapsed, or the plan that was approved by another or by a third-party agency was the only approval that they got. We want to make sure that when this process starts, that they get both approval through us and the third-party agency, at least for plan reviews, before they start any processes of construction. And then there's some changes in the bonding requirements for manufacturers. We added deposits in there and then removed purchaser. And these are only for the bonding requirements for manufacturers if they are applicable to the manufacturer who's collecting a certain amount of down payments. All right. And then we also added a recommendation for post-installation meeting for these projects. Currently, there's a suggestion in there for a pre-construction meeting. I think these are important, especially if you're doing larger projects, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, from the Division of Housing, the manufacturer, the developers, the local building department, and then also the contractors that are on site. All right. Other things, again, we want to make sure that manufacturers are registering in a timely manner. Some manufacturers have 3 years registration. We charge an annual fee instead of 1 lump fee, just so that our revenue doesn't go up and down every 3 years. So they just need to make sure that they're registering on time and paying their fees on time. There's in Rule 4.17.4.1, there is an option in there for future zone structures. So if somebody wanted to propose a building that can be installed in basically in zones or areas that they want to have a structure that can go in anywhere in any jurisdiction that meets those building code requirements, there's an option for that. And then also last rulemaking, we had to do emergency rulemaking for emergency response units. These are units that do not necessarily comply with the Division of Housing building code requirements, and the locals have a less stringent building code requirement, but these are only when the locals declare a state of emergency for their area. These are not applicable to all structures. These are only for, like, let's say the Marshall fires that happened, and they wanted to bring in units that were meeting the local building requirements and they were less stringent than ours. They can build to those requirements because there was a state of emergency that was put out for that. Okay. Again, like I said, third-party agencies, there's a option here for third-party agencies to become certified so they can do oversight inspections on our behalf at the site locations. All right, Rule 5. This is specific to the sellers, which is today's presentation. This is the only change that was made in Rule 5, just to clarify that single-family homes, duplexes, and townhouses that are built to the IBC, you still need to register as a seller because those are still single-family homes or homes that are built for single-family residential use. Although it's being built to the IBC standards, it doesn't necessarily make it a commercial building. It's just that you exceeded the limitations of the IRC and had to use the IBC to construct a home. So if you get a structure that's greater than 3 stories in height, that exceeds the IRC requirements, and you do have to build to the IBC, which would kick you into the IBC books, but you're still considered residential use, and if you sell those structures, you still have to register as a seller. All right, Rule 6 is going to be for the installers, just making sure that they are making sure that they're registering on time, and then also clarifying some of the responsibilities of their site installation. So when they need to report issues to the manufacturer during the installation process, when they need to report to us, when an inspector is out on site doing an inspection, try to filter out what are the reasons why that home could not be installed correctly, or if it was installed correctly, what are the reasons why it was done that way? So was it not done to the manufacturer's installation instructions, or was it something that the installer did? The other thing that we did in Rule 6 is that we combined the installer registration requirements of HUD and mobile homes to the same requirements as modular and tiny homes. And the reason for this is that HUD homes, mobile homes, modular homes, and tiny homes, when you're installing all those structures, it all goes back to the installation requirements that are in the installation manual. So there are slight differences between HUD homes and modular homes and the other types of structures, but for the most part, everything's always going to revert back to the installation manual. If you're not installing per that installation manual, then you're not installing it correctly. If there's any deviations from that installation manual, then you need to get an engineered stamp drawing of that installation, or you need to reach out to the manufacturer and get an addendum from them on how to install that home. All right. And then some clarifications for the tiny home installation requirements were added into Rule 6. So Rule 7 is just all the foundation requirements for jurisdictions that do not have building departments. There's a lot of sections that were added in there, so I didn't add them all here. So please review the requirements for foundation systems for homes that are being installed, or actually not homes, structures, manufactured structures that are being installed in jurisdictions without building departments. And then also if there's any site-built hotels, motels, and multifamily units that are being built, stick-built or site-built in jurisdictions without building departments. All right. For sellers, there is if you were not aware, there are requirements in there for a seller to notify the consumer that if this building is going to a jurisdiction without a building department, that you are to notify them that the plans do have to go to the Division of Housing for approval prior to the construction of the foundation system. Okay. All right, so here are some links of all the reference documents that basically we pull all this information from for this presentation. And then there's my contact information. If you have any questions about tiny homes, the tiny home email is right there, FB and FB&R, also multifamily registration and seller requirements. You're going to email the manufactured buildings email, and then for foundation questions and installation questions, you're going to reach out to the DOLA MHIP email down below. All right. All right. So everything that on these next few slides here are exactly the same as last rulemaking. Basically, if you're selling manufactured structures and you are required to register as a seller, you have to have coverage, and it's a minimum $50,000 coverage. If you're collecting deposits from the consumer, if you exceed that $50,000, then you have to have additional coverage that could be done through an escrow, or what you can do is if you know that you're going to collect over $50,000, you can have a a bond or financial coverage that exceeds that limit. Let's just say like, hey, I'm only going to take up to $100,000 in deposits before I take on the next project. I'm going to get a $100,000 policy for that coverage. Or you're like, I'm not sure. I'm just going to get the $50,000. And if we do exceed that $50,000, then I have to get that escrow in place to for that additional coverage. Right. And this is an accumulative amount of money that you collect. It's not just from one person. It's the total amount that you're collecting from all consumers for your cells. Okay. And these are some things that were added, or not added, but these are things that need to be added to your contracts. And so you'll see in items A, B, C, and D, these are items that have to be in the contract, their sales contract, to be compliant with the statute. If you do not currently have any of these items, or maybe you're missing a couple of these items, please get them added to your contracts. We do have to do audits on sales contracts. So if we do an audit on a sales contract that was done during these approved rule processes, and you're found to be non-compliance, you do have to bring yourself into compliance for that. And just remember, anything you're selling forward, make sure that you include these items in there. Okay. Again, just more requirements for the contracts. Some minimum requirements for what needs to be in them, and then also just basically some statements that need to be in there for the delivery of the home. And all this information is for the consumer, but also required by statute. All righty. So I'm kind of zooming through those real quick because we only got about 10 minutes here. All right, so this is just some items that we wanted to bring to your attention. HB 24-1036. This is the sales tax exemption. They added modular homes and tiny homes to that tax exemption for the sale, storage, and use, or sales, storage, use, and consumption of these products. And that's going to be effective January 1st, 2025. If there's any specific questions that you have about that tax exemption, the best people to reach out to would be, I believe it's a Division of Taxation, because this is their bill. And then the next one that was approved was HB 24-1152, which is the accessory dwelling unit bill, which kind of helps or promotes the acceptance of ADUs in jurisdictions. But these are for jurisdictions that qualify as supportive jurisdictions. So please read through that bill and see what kind of incentives there are for those local jurisdictions that would be adopting these ADU requirements. Okay. All right. Anything else? I think that came a little bit too. No, that was it. All right. So I'm done with the presentation. Is there any questions or comments? Anything anybody would like to talk about?
Donnie, this is Tawny.
Hey, Tony.
Good morning.
Good
I just
morning.
wanted to let everyone know that the Division of Real Estate is offering, or the Department of Revenue is offering webinars specific to the new tax exemptions. So I believe they're or later on this week, but if people search the Colorado Department of Revenue, they can register for those webinars.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any questions or concerns from anybody else?
Donnie, I'm putting the link for the sign up for the newsletter in case anybody here doesn't have it.
Okay, for the presentation this week? For the
Well, for the newsletter first, and then I'm going to put in the link for the presentation once we get it up, but it's going to take us a couple days to get it up.
Okay. All right. And then, so just a reminder, this session is recorded. So if you would like, once this gets posted on our webpage, you should be able to review it again. But if you have any specific questions, you can always just reach out to myself. Both my information is down at the bottom, and then Sam is right above mine. If you have any questions for seller requirements, or if you're just curious about the other requirements, we do have 3 other presentations this week for manufacturers, installers and inspectors, third-party agencies, and the local jurisdictions as well, if you want to listen on those and see what kind of things that are may come up during those presentations. Okay. Was there anything in the chat, Sam?
I don't see anything in the chat, Donnie.
All righty. Okay, well, if you want to, I guess, stop recording, we can go ahead and end this.